I'm originally from South America, Guyana, born in a very small town called Berbice. And my parents, who I call entrepreneurs, came from Guyana with 6 children to the UK. So there were 8 of us travelling from South America. Arriving in the UK, I was about 4. And even at that age, I remember quite clearly my arrival in the UK because it was just so totally different to anywhere or anything I'd seen in Guyana. We came from a very bright, sunny, carefree country to the UK that was cold, damp, dark, and very scary. And my parents, being the entrepreneurs that they were, found accommodation for two rooms in a basement flat in Battersea. And we lived there for about 8 years. It was in one of the most run-down parts of London, very poor part of London. In fact, the street that we lived in no longer exists. They demolished the street because it was such a bad area. But it was 8 fantastic years. I've always been a campaigner from the time we arrived in the UK, because one of the things that stuck out in my mind when my parents were looking for that 2-roomed, not 2 bedrooms, 2-roomed basement flat in Battersea, it was at a time when landlords, it was still legal for landlords to have notices on their doors that said no blacks, no Irish, no pets, and sometimes no children. So it was a really, really very hard time. So I think that it was instilled, the whole campaign, diversity, race, gender, that whole area was ingrained in my mind from a very early age. One of my very first jobs was with CBS Records. I was there for 7.5 years. For the 7.5 years that I was there, I was the only visible minority, as in with colour, that wasn't on the switchboard or wasn't a cleaner. And I was there for 7.5 years, deputising sometimes as I moved up through the departments for head of press. But every time I applied for the job, I didn't get it. And it was very clear to me that there was a level of not only sexism, but it was a level of racism. And on the 3rd time of applying, I decided the only way for me to move up was to move out. So I left and started my own business. And through starting my own business, I met 2 men, again, networking, actually. Networked with a couple of guys who eventually asked me to join as a founding director of Choice FM. Choice FM changed the youth culture in the UK because now you can't turn on a radio without hearing black music. We sold Choice FM 15 years ago, and it was through the sale of Choice FM that I became the first self-made black female millionaire in the UK. Well, I think, as I said, for me, in order for me to move up, I had to move out. And it was when I moved out of working for CBS Records that I found that I had to network. I had to network because that was the only way that people would find out who I am. I had to raise my own profile. I had to make sure people knew that I was there, because if they don't know you're there, they can't come to you. I mean, there's a Chinese saying that a business without advertising, or you could call that profiling, you could put it down to networking. So let's say a business without networking is like a young man winking at a young girl in the dark. He knows he's doing it, but nobody else does. So unless you go out there and let everybody know who you are and what you're doing, you might as well be winking in the dark.